how's it going? I just finished listening to your hour-long talk in 30 minutes.
Oh, that's the benefit of YouTube. You can just kind of, it's pretty efficient. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I was listening to Vervaeke's question and answer the other day, and it was like, I can't speed this up.
Oh yeah. I almost that's almost a prerequisite to listening to anything, is the speed, because it's more like reading speed.
Yeah.
For the average Joe.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know me better than I know you, so why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. John Madney. I grew up in South Holland, Illinois, in a Dutch community, but I'm a child of immigrants from Lebanon and Canada. My dad was the Arabic minister on the Back to God Hour.
Oh, yeah.
And, so he's a Calvin College grad. And so I basically grew up in a Dutch community where I wasn't Dutch, but I really benefited from it and became, I am Dutch in many, many ways, which I highly, it was a great place to learn a work ethic. And I guess I'd be an apologist for all the good of the Christian tradition as being a great way to avoid unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson talks about.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I went through the Christian schools and had very few friends because I was different, because I talked different, because my parents weren't Chicagoans. So it wasn't until I got to Trinity College, which is the non-denominational Calvinist school, much better than Calvin College, that it was like freedom from your past. But so sometimes I look at these things as being, gave me a great ability to avoid a lot of teenage trouble. And I spent my time with men who were teaching me about construction, woodworking, and wisdom, and was sort of spared the alcohol. Was about the only drug back then.
Yeah.
And so anyway, went off to Utah State to finish my undergraduate work, and was involved in a home missions Christian Reformed Church and InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and really came alive because I finally had somebody to talk to about my faith. Because where I grew up, that's one thing, people would have the coffee hour discussions of theology, but not how they were praying, even though I believe they were.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So, and basically I got a degree in an ecological study of range science, which hardly anybody has heard of. It's a study of what you can do on non-arable land, which is really, and it was sort of a prophetic degree to me, because it didn't have any use at the time, in that I fell into medicine. And so I'm a family practice doctor, did my Army time, and then ended up in rural Montana, living in Fairview, Alberta South, otherwise known as Dillon, Montana.
Not quite as cold, but all the isolation.
Right. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's 1,000 miles south of Jordan Peterson, but a very similar demographic, where you have the 3,000 people, the outlying communities, and regardless of where you're heading, whether you're heading to Toronto or Harvard, you still get to work washing dishes, so.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I get the feel for that. So when I'm selling Jordan Peterson's comments or concepts, I give his quick bio to patients, say, this guy's legit. He's just grew up like you. And so I use him to help articulate what I've already been doing with my patients before I met Jordan Peterson. So he's just given me, I don't want to say just given me words, but I obviously have more in some ways than he does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because of the faith aspect of saying, yeah, I've suffered for my faith because I thought God wanted me to be in medicine, but I didn't figure out why
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for a long time.
Mm.
You know, because and so that's where I see, like you were just talking about, some people might think Jordan Peterson a little dull. It's like, because where's the new content? And it's like, sorry, there is no new content. Because the issue is, can you live it and stop talking? And I don't mean I talk all day to patients.
Right.
And into the evening. And like I take extra hours. Like this morning, I didn't go into work. It's not a scheduled day, but I work every Wednesday morning for people. I say, the business doesn't support our being together. So I have to do it on my time. But that's like every Wednesday morning is my time to share with patients how to get well, which is a huge story. So
Huge.
yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about, it's kind of funny, was sort of the Vervaeke. I listened to him every Friday on my way home from work on my bike. And he's such a kind, caring guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a heart.
Yeah.
But when he talks as if faith doesn't work anymore, or religion doesn't work anymore, or it's like, what do you mean? Let me tell you my story. Is I studied the Old Testament law, not the ceremonial, but the I mean, if you can't figure out how to translate when you see a animal stuck in a fence, if you can't translate that to rest of life, that's what we should be talking about. Is like, and that's what Jordan Peterson lit up. Is I looked at the law, but I didn't delve into the stories as much, you know. But saying this stuff works today, nothing's changed. You just have to figure out, and you have to listen to God. What's the refrain of the Old Testament? Hearken to the voice of the Lord. Today, if you hear his voice, it's like, what about that? That's not codified. So anyway, I feel for Vervaeke is like, you're missing the supernatural, the spiritual, the spirit world. It's not connecting, but it's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where the answers are. They're going back, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect. Well, John and I, we're, slowly building sort of a relationship because it's all virtual and we're trying to understand each other. But no, I mean, and John's been very, especially on other videos that he's made where he's mentioned me and Jonathan Pajot and our project. That's sort of the dividing line between us, that Jonathan Pajot and I believe that Christianity is still a very viable ongoing solution, if it were, to the meaning crisis. And in fact, I think part of that is borne out by the fact that what we're experiencing as a meaning crisis is directly related to the loss of Christianity in the society. And I think C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Barfield, they all made that quite clear. Yeah. There are, and part of the reason I always do the introductory videos when I can with people is because obviously for myself growing up in Patterson, son of, home missionary Stan Vanderclay and Barb, and right. You growing up, your father was a back to God. I mean, a little bit inside baseball here, because when you say South Holland, I saw the name Madney and it started ringing a bell, and then you start out, it's like, I know where this is coming from. But so
right.
You and I were formed within a rich, good, not perfect by any means, but a cohesive, rich community in which, in many ways, well, we had it easier in that, sort of like the way infant baptism works in the Christian Reformed Church. You sort of have to opt out if your parents put you in when they baptize you as an infant, and you sort of have to opt out later in life if you say, no, I don't want that. But many people have not had our experience, and and so I think when, in all fairness, the church has to, and I think one of the big takeaways I got from Jordan Peterson very early on was the church in the rise of Jordan Peterson and the enormous popularity that he experienced early on, mysteriously. I think there was in there a deep lesson for the church.
Oh yeah. I hear that, and then I got a comment on the opt-in, opt-out. Is that's almost per se how I used to think of covenant theology, not to talk too much in talk, but it's like when you're born in a Christian family, and I struggled with this when I was younger, just a little, was I don't know what it's like to have a conversion experience.
Yep.
And I have had them in life, but not that basic conversion, because earliest memory was, I believe, does anyone else, or am I alone in this project?
Yeah.
But it wasn't a haughty thing at all. It's just like a little bit lonely.
Yeah.
So, and I feel when I listen to a number of the atheists, they've for one clarified to me that Christianity and the redemption narrative. I know that personally because that's sort of the test of faith. Are you in? Is can you forgive? But then I hadn't thought of it is that Christians forgive. Why can Bogosian or why are all these people accepted by the Christians are willing to talk to them? Because we can change.
Yeah. Well, and I think forgiveness is Christians' capacity to forgive is nested within their belief in God, their belief in God's sovereignty. Because the reason, if you're not a Christian, forgiveness is not affordable is because finally we are in an animal competition, and forgiveness is not affordable because it's just not economically feasible to allow your enemy to live if you can't trust them going into the future. So you must condemn. But within Christianity, you have this, especially Reformed Christianity, you have this sovereign God who so thoroughly has the universe. Now that gives us, we have doubt and we don't know why these bad things happen or why God allows this or that. But underneath it is this trust that finally our God will make good all of this, even if we with our small minds can't know. And that affords forgiveness.
Oh yeah, and yesterday I was talking to a patient of mine who I've known for 15 years, and she quickly went through her life story of how she shed all of her animosity and things. And I've watched that intentionally for years because from some psychiatric listening to lectures on it, is that you can burn somebody's badness out with patience.
Yes.
And I didn't do that alone.
That's a pastoral move. I sit in pastoral care is 95% listening.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that she was telling me how she just got rebaptized, not because she was it was because it was because she had so much to wash off. And I'm not going to worry about because a rebaptism on the part of the individual, not a part of the church. It's like, who am I to say?
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate that you're a small town general practitioner, because in that way, your situation is sort of similar to a pastor. Now, you're a doctor, but you're a generalist, which means you're dealing with people in a much broader way. It's sort of the difference between a pastor and a therapist. A therapist often sits in a little room it's sort of a containment. But when I deal with people, I deal with them in the wild. And as a GP, you're knowing these people for years, and you have a whole body perspective. Just like with a pastor, we tend to have a whole life perspective. So that's really helpful for me to make this connection.
It's very true, and that's what I'm thankful. The small town life gives you get to do more because of necessity, because the specialist isn't always there, and then you also have the longevity of now knowing some people for 23 years, and to reminisce and to sit and talk to somebody who I remember at some point in your life, you ruined my day and made me really not happy because of our time in the emergency room. And then you fast forward, and this is where somebody you were talking to, I forget her name. No, actually it was the guy that had in Australia that had drug trouble and was married and having a kid. God can undo bad.
Yes.
But not many people actually get to live that, where you stick around long enough that people shed, you're glad for the pain. So it's a opposite of meaningless. And so, so I guess that I don't want to be, if for some reason John Vervaeke hears this, he noticed that my weekly pattern is 5:00 on Friday afternoon. I'm downloading at my high-speed connection at work to listen to him on the way home, because he is giving new vocabulary.
Yes.
And I haven't sat down and written the words down, but one of them I love, and I've shared it in the hallway, and it worked, was his idea of addiction.
Yes. Because
Jordan Peterson, I share too, is like, look, addiction is just nothing better to do. And that's where the intellectuals have a problem. And is that they have better things to do just by sitting thinking. And I've read books where you can be addicted to ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget the name of the book. So it's so much easier for people that have the intellectual bent to shed alcohol or drugs, and even go around talking about using hallucinogens and not getting burned by them. Yeah. That kind of irritates me, because it's like, hey man, not everybody can dabble in that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I can. And so anyway, Vervaeke has talked about
well, as a doctor, you
agency.
See it. And the same thing as a pastor, I see it, because there's high flying people have dabbled and they're doing okay, but you see all the wreckage down below, and you understand the prohibition that says don't go there. Right. Well, you might be okay, but maybe in its 70% chance you won't, and this will be bad. Yeah, no, very true.
Yeah, and so that idea of agency, that's I didn't have the word, but that's all I do, because I have some special knowledge. And it's actually, I say that serious tongue in cheek. It's ubiquitously known knowledge about how to be healthy. But it is so contrary to the advice given by the medical profession that, and it's not a joke.
It isn't a joke. I laugh often at the most tragic things, because you don't want to cry.
Here's the code word. This is the code word, because I don't want to talk about what the science of what I do. The code word is fasting, because that is the most powerful medical tool, and it's also cheap, safe drug called the third eye. So you can go to a nice special place that can't hurt you by skipping a few meals. Of course it's hard to do if you're on the standard American diet, and that's all I'll say is that that when you start sharing with people things that are free, like skip a meal, skip a pill, that gives agency. And some people, when they get it, it's like they come alive. And I also let this, I might get in trouble, but I let my patients can text me anytime, a lot of them. And it's like they're texting, just had a success, you know, and it's great, you know. So here's what I wanted to maybe touch on, not maybe, is I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Mechanics since you talked about it last.
Okay.
And it was a stellar book. It was sort of a weird book in a way, because I got on my bike to ride to work while I'm listening to it, and it was narrating my bike ride per se. And even when I took an extra mile to get to work, and when I was crossing the road, I had to hold my hand up to block the sun from my eyes. And he said yellow ball while I was doing that, because, have you read it?
I've started reading it along with
I'm
the
sorry.
other Nelson books I've started. But
shouldn't-
go right ahead, spoil away.
Oh, this was just the introduction, was just that he's talking about the smells and the sights and the changes in air temperature as you go between two sloughs in Minnesota to dry land. And while I ride through this cold spot every morning, it's like descending into a refrigerator off of a hill. And it was like, this is too much from a coincidence. I mean, you can't get here from materialism standpoint. But what I loved about him was he's so high quality philosophy of science, and he also addressed the people that I want to be acknowledged. And I think Jordan Peterson gets these people, but I don't know if he's talking to them. It's the guy that uses his hands, the non-verbal person that makes the world work. And I did say guy, because it pretty much, although if it's my daughter who's currently in backstage theater at Utah State, and she's a costume maker, she's nonverbal too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean, in her trade, is what about all the people that are disenfranchised, sitting in the basement, taking drugs because somebody took their tools away?
That's right. That's right. And I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and New Jersey's a weird state, and growing up Christian Reformed in New Jersey was weird because of course, New Jersey was one of those colonies that the Dutch settled as immigrants.
Yeah.
And those who stayed in New Jersey, Grand Rapids, where the CRC educational institutions were, they would tend to suck off the intellectuals out of New Jersey. So
Yeah.
And go to Grand Rapids and Calvin College and seminary. So Jersey, the CRC in Jersey was a very blue collar community.
Oh, so even more than South Holland.
Yeah, yeah. And so the main college job I had on summers was working at Kukin Lumber, where I delivered wood and, worked with, carpenters and contractors. Some of them would be CRC. My first non-church paying job was cleaning up in the back of a bakery for a Dutch CRC baker. And so Jersey had a very strong, you're exactly right, a blue collar, understood, the people that build and keep the physical world going around us. And that's something that made Peterson a very unusual intellectual, in that you could tell by the way he talked that he liked and respected and understood a lot of materiality and roughness. He's sort of the rough man from Alberta that a lot of the intellectuals on YouTube don't get.
And it's kind of ironic that the people that work with material per se get that there's something more in a way. And because I used to have this thought when I was young, is you don't get to philosophize until your muscles are tired. because I worked for a philosopher, farmer, fabricator, and who built equipment for handling onion sets for his own use. And so, but he was also very strong believer, and was full of ideas, but it was always at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
because, and that's these guys in the ivory tower. It'd be great to introduce them to the people that can do trim carpentry, or when you know how to not cross thread a bolt. Because, oh, and I should say, I'm a serious blue collar. That's where I'm in my element, is when I'm actually working with my hands. But I kind of have realized that's not my calling to do. It does it, I mean, but I've built a couple houses with my boys, and I could hire on with any trade as a helper today. I mean, if an electrician said, I need you to, I could pick up I could go to the garage, get the tools, and go. I'm not I always need a oversight. But you know what I'm saying? So I'm not, but anyways, reaching out to those people, and basically this is where I wish I could get to the government end of things, is to say, how can we structure things so they're not for corporation, but for their average Joe? Because you're not going to solve the problems of our country without saying that there's a ton of people that their psyche is, I want us to be able to see what I did at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And those people, they need help.
Yeah. Well, John Edwards, a while ago, and of course he crashed and burned with a woman, but part of to me, it's not hard to understand wasn't hard to understand the appeal of Trump in the blue collar world at all. There was a sense that, and this partly is I think part of the reason why Biden, he seems to have a better sense of it too. But there's just a radical disconnect, and a lot of it has come because of urbanization.
Definitely.
But yet in the urban center, the urban landscape works because men are working with their hands. And again, you drive by any crew, there might be a woman holding the flag or something like that, but it's men with the shovels, it's men in the heavy equipment. And again, I'm not saying anything. Women are in the hospitals, changing the adult diapers, and I'm not saying one is more important than the other, but the conversation has sort of continued to just drift up and away. And you and I both grew up. I mean, the CRC, when we were young, still had sort of the mythic, and sounds like you worked for one, sort of the mythic farmer theologian.
Oh yeah.
They
and
go into the farmer's house and they had Kuyper and Bavinck on their shelf, and you're like, why does a farmer read Bavinck?
And that was the thing that my dad happens to be visiting. He's in the next room, but his hearing is such that he won't hear any of this. He gave me the one wonderful thing was an awe for people that could actually do things.
Yes.
Because here's a guy that right now he's in another room translating Arabic to English or French and posting it on academia.edu where he has people that read his stuff,
Yep.
So It's kind of funny. He's in he's 91 and cranking away. But he was always, who was impressed him wasn't academics. It was a Dutch farmer, because of the, they often had to build their own. If you're a truck farmer, you had to build your own handling equipment. And then tradesmen. And so that was a good thing it suited my personality and my skills, but it was also good to have that reinforcement. So that's something that I really am thankful he gave me, was that push. Something I need to mention, I don't have a timer in front of me. Do you know
Well,
what
we've got another 20 minutes or so.
Okay. Something amazing happened to me was that I can't read much at all with book in hand because there's no, if you looked at my schedule, there is none.
Right.
No slack time, but in the 5 minutes it takes me to go from the clinic to the hospital, I listen to something.
Yep.
And so when we were building houses, I'd be hearing protection on and a sander in hand or laying tile, listening to medical lectures. I mean, it was never, but came across this college in Ottawa, Ontario, called Augustine College. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
It's the smallest school in the world. It has about 15 students average per its 1-year course. And it's Augustine College, which is, it's a Orthodox little O Christian college that teaches classics or basically history and philosophy, music, from a Christian perspective, and takes you starting with Old Testament and Plato right up until today. And 3 of my children went there as a 1-year program, and they offered a 1-week program for anybody who wants to come in June for a week. And it would sort of like for people that wanted something way more than Jordan Peterson. Wonderful. I mean, Jordan Peterson's great. It's the place, and it's kind of an unfound jewel. But I got connected with that and have been there for almost 10 years straight for a week. And so I've read Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas, or listened to it. And then that has been the most wonderful thing because it helps me, I think, historically now, where did the idea I'm thinking about right now come from? And it's like, I can trace it back to its first written root in my head. And that's where you really wonder, what does progressive mean? Because they absolutely don't know what progressive means, because there's only one thing. There's only conservatives. And progressive is virtually deaf.
Yeah.
Because I'm the guy that had the first word. When it comes to tech, I'm the first guy there. Because I never learned to type well. I never, anyway, like people, I'm a pioneer with tech, but I'm also the arch conservative, not politically conservative, but hey, those laws in the Old Testament that Moses was given, he didn't figure those out. They were given. It was like God gave us some basic things. It's like, don't do this.
Yeah.
Because it's too painful. And I knew this a long time, was if you follow the law, I never thought that bad things wouldn't happen. It's just when they do happen, you got good conscience.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson spells it out. It's like, you better build your ark, man.
Yeah.
And what's your ark? It's your community, right?
Yep. That's right.
It's not an insurance policy.
Yep.
It's not concrete walls instead of wood walls. It's not ammo. And you don't want a doomsday, because if your community is your ark, you're enjoying it. You don't even need the tragedy.
Yes, that's right.
And so what about that? Can a progressive go beyond saying, how can you build a community unless you think that you can't leave it without serious due cause?
Yeah.
And so does that make sense? I mean, this progressive stuff, like,
oh yes, it makes perfect sense. I was so what's happening now is that people are starting, because I'm trying to not just talk. So I'm a small church pastor.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, so I know what will happen in my channel is I've talked to about 40 or 50 people or 100 people. Well, I'll keep talking to those 100 people, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep the door open so that I can talk to new people like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's going to happen if we share this video, you're going to get some requests to have conversation. I know that's going to happen. And but so today there's these different sub channels. People who've talked to me of starting their own YouTube channels, and one kind of communal channel they've called Randos United. Now I keep my hands off this because I just want to see what they'll do.
Yeah.
And so like today there was a conversation with Joey and Tyler, who are in the local meetup here, and Julian, who's in Manitoba, and he's the Hutterite. I've had a few conversations with him. And I'm listening to them talk, and I'm just thinking, and then they get into, Tyler's talking about trust. And it's like, this is exactly right. And trust is the connector of your community. And if you don't have trust, you can't have an ark, because you have a pile of wood.
Yeah, and I look at everybody, almost everybody, if not everybody, is, if I lose my job, can I come to your house for dinner?
That's right. That's right. And so I live and work in how do I say it? A decayed area of Sacramento. And in California, our cities are like rings, and well, it's kind of changing now, but they continue to grow out, but you have this planned obsolescence. The community that's 20 years old is discarded in a sense, until at some point it becomes chic again because it's really old. But anyway, so I live in one of those discarded communities, and people will knock on my door because it's a church, and pastor, I need, money.
Right.
It's like, okay, come in and sit down. And some of them, they didn't come here for a conversation. They came here for money. But no, if I'm going to give you anything, I'm going to pay. You're going to pay for this conversation. with this handout with a little bit of conversation. And so the first thing I asked them is, I know you weren't hatched. I know human biology. What happened to mom, dad, sister, brother? And, because by the time you come to my door, all of the connectors in that ark have been destroyed.
Yeah.
Something has destroyed them. Let's talk about that. And, so it begins. But I think you're exactly right. Your ark is your community. And the floods always come.
Right. And so one of the things, again, if a I think that if any person calling themselves progressive was listening to this, they notice that if I'm setting my clock by when they talk next, it's only that I wish I could talk with them a bit. But some folks, it's just saying, oh, it must be rough to be so intellectually gifted and not be in power of submitting. I mean, finding that's hard to figure that, well, who gets into heaven? It's whoever kneels down. I mean, you'll judge yourself.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
right.
I mean, it doesn't matter what you say you believe. You know what I'm driving at.
I know what you're driving at. I know. Well,
and even some of these guys might say, "Oh, yeah," like Robert Barron said, "I don't believe in the God you don't believe in." Do you know what I'm?
Yes. Yes. Well, Dallas Willard said it well. He and this might be apocryphal, but I heard it said, who gets into heaven? Dallas Willard said, anyone who can stand it. And I thought that just puts it so beautifully, because here's the thing. When you think about, let's say God is the source of everything worthwhile.
Yeah.
Let's say it that way.
Yes.
So he is this being of, unlimited beauty, unlimited truth, unlimited power. We, to the degree that we are trying to maintain our separation from that, proximity to that will destroy us.
Yeah.
Because how can I assert my own independent beauty, my own independent truth, my own independent power as compared to something on that scale sufficient to have created the kind of universe we see today?
Yeah. And that's where I like what you said about the system that got, because I look at creation, the more I study it as a biologist, because by the way, I'm back in the ag scene and the range science and because it's all one thing, and like human health is based on agricultural health in more ways than we thought. But it's almost funny where somebody would say, oh, look at the cutting edge in pasture management. And it's like, well, it's notes that were handed off at the guillotine, literally, by some lady so-and-so, Lady Roland, hands off, like, here's how to graze efficiently. My head's coming off, but don't let this get lost. And we call it new today. I could find the reference. It would take a couple days, but no, it wouldn't take a day. It'd take an hour. But there's so much we've lost from the old.
Yes.
It's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
how going back and reading these old books.
Yeah.
Because some of them are just dusted off. I mean, they're no, but you haven't heard of them, and you just say, man, how did we lose this?
Yeah.
And we call it progressive to be, and it's like, no, it's not progressive. It's a way God made things for us to manage, because there's no doubt we can, if we say, I choose life from Moses in the Old Testament, what does that mean? Is like, my hobby is making life in my yard, plant and, whatever. And so, sure, we're gardeners and caretakers. We're not here to rape, pillage, and figure out how to wash all the soil into the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, it's been done, but that's always very corporate. That isn't a modern farmer is an ecologist, because they know, and they're just trying to figure out how to make changes without going broke. But I study this stuff, and I'm familiar with it. So it's not just armchair. I'm out on the land some, and this is the small world story my son works for Glenn Elzinga. You know him?
Glenn Elzinga? No.
Yeah. That's because he went to high school with you. Does that ring a bell? Oh,
those Elzingas?
Yeah. But if he was a couple years different than you, then you wouldn't have necessarily.
Yeah, well, that's right. But I know that there are Elzingas in the New Jersey tribe. So
but
there are plenty of Elzingas there.
He's an Idaho rancher.
Really?
Who moved? Yeah, and they have a sort of one of the most unique ranches in the country. So it's kind of a small world that. Because I was talking to Glenn Elzinga, and he goes, "Oh, Paul's legitimate." At least based on your dad.
Right, based on my dad. Well, that's the beauty.
But that's true. I mean,
that's right, because there's reputation, and of course, Stan had a reputation in New Jersey because of the work that Stan did. And one of the things that my father did was he was able to, in a sense, mobilize many of the good-hearted people in North Jersey to support this crazy little mission in the First Ward in the neighborhoods that people sort of migrated out of as they became wealthier. But what has happened in New Jersey is that New York just continued to grow out, and similar to what I see happening in California, the children of the blue collar workers in New Jersey could just simply not afford a home. And so what happened is that New Jersey community has continued to just have a diaspora. And so I've never been to a high school reunion yet, and I very much want to go to the next one. But most of my high school class is spread about, and there's a loss there, because we spent 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade, 100 of us all together. And, and that village is scattered now.
And that gives also some reminder of how the society has changed, because if I stayed with the demographic for 13 years, you'd say there was not the mental illness back then.
Yes.
Couldn't have been.
That's right.
Because we all one kid got hit by a truck, one died of unknown to me cause and that we're talking about a cohort. That's a lot of people.
Yes.
It's like that were accounted for so yeah, that's where Vervaeke and his domicide word, that I really feel that I haven't used it because people, you'd have to explain it too much, but it's so true. It's like, it was good to just stay put. And that's part of why I like to stay put, is like, just suffer here.
Yes. That's exactly right.
Don't chase for a better place.
No. Well, and it's interesting because both of us, at least in previous generations, I mean, your father to a degree, but my grandparents, my great-grandparents, I mean, they did emigrate.
Yeah.
And they left. And I wish I know why on my mother's side, the great-grandparents left. It was because there was opportunity to do dairy work in Massachusetts, and things probably weren't well in Friesland in the Netherlands. My father's side were Jews, and I don't know what happened, but they left their Jewish community in northern Netherlands, and they emigrated and assimilated to the Dutch Calvinists in Western Michigan.
Yeah.
But you're very much, I don't know if you've read any of him because you don't have reading time, and I totally get that. That's why I listen to everything.
I listen to Kindle.
Oh, okay.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. But there's a blogger, I've mentioned him a number of times, Slate Star Codex. His pen name is Scott Alexander, and it's a very big blog. He's a psychiatrist, and he has on his blog somewhere, you can Google it probably without too much difficulty, or maybe I'll find it and dump it in the notes here. But he's read studies on this question of, as Vervaeke says, Vervaeke's been just wonderful in terms of giving me language for stuff that I've known but couldn't talk about.
Yeah, he's a philologist.
Yes. but the relationship between mental illness and domicide is huge. The dislocation, we're in a sense meant to be planted, and we know with plants, so many plants, you don't just take them out of the ground and plop them someplace else. They die often. So but this is what we're doing with people on a massive scale, and it's no wonder that many of them aren't doing well.
Yeah, and those of us who, I don't like moving. I love traveling. But
yes, exactly.
but we have to. So I actually I think I've taken it one notch further than sometimes Jordan Peterson will often say, I don't have an answer for something. And it's like, well, we have to start. That's the project, is coming up with an answer and Jordan Peterson totally has a heart for it because he worked out the self-authoring.
Yes.
And I thought, why don't I have time for the self-authoring? Because I am moving so fast in a good direction that it's not for me.
Yeah.
If you know what because I'm doing new stuff while I was listening to you this half hour. I uploaded some software about some new medical wearable so that I can teach it to my partners tomorrow. Yes. Because they have little kids at home. They can't do this, Yes. And so I'm doing things, tripping over myself to, and it's all about agency, because when the patient learns what's going on in their body, they say bye-bye to me. And that's a party,
Yes. Yes.
It's like, oh, you taught me what the problem was. And if I say, and some say, I see what the problem is, can't do anything about it. I say, well, we can brainstorm for the next 2 years. I'm happy.
Yeah. Okay, John, we're about out of time. So, I've got some housekeeping stuff I want to do here a second, because first of all, can I share this conversation?
Sure. I must say, I hope I didn't do too much cryptic in talk.
Oh no. I know my people. And I'm going to share this conversation tomorrow. And just, okay, so it's an hour conversation. About 30 minutes after, I'm going to get a bunch of emails of people, how can I talk to John? They're going to ask me. So I will forward what I do when I get those kind of emails is I just forward the email to you, and it's up to you what to do with it. But I know already that there's a lot of people who are going to deeply resonate with a whole lot of what you said. Okay, so
thanks.
Just be ready for that.
Yeah.
Because the internet is a very big place, and it's all about connections. And so some people are going to want to talk to you.
Can I say one quick thing? Is I met Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pajot, and the president of Augustine College. Well, I knew the president because he's a friend, in one place. And that's where I learned about fasting from one of the other speakers. And that turned my life upside down. I met Jonathan Pajot, and it's like, this dude's too hard to listen. I mean, I'm going to keep following him, but my right side of my brain was shriveled until I met him.
Oh, I know. When I first listened to the Pajot, it was like, what is this dude talking about?
But I get it.
Yeah. Eventually I could.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
No, that's cool. I'm from New Jersey.
But it was an amazing room
all the time.
You go chasing down a chance to shake Jordan Peterson's hand, and it's like, that changed my life. But Jordan didn't change my life because I already knew all his stuff.
Now, where was this that you met them all?
Eastern Catholic Homeschool Conference in an industrial park in Seattle. I mean, it was the funniest venue in the world.
That's hysterical.
I mean, it was before before he was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, super cool. He had gone viral, but he wasn't. There was no 12 rules for life out yet.
Yeah. Oh,
so
wow.
It was a weird experience.
That's so cool. Well, John, you and I are going to talk again.
Sure.
Some point in life, Lord willing, I'll shake your hand.
Yeah.
And I will post this tomorrow, and emails will come. Trust me.
Thanks. And thanks for what you do, because it's great to share what you're doing.
Oh.
And God gave you an ability to really crank the videos, man.
Yeah, he did.
And I could keep up with him. Okay.
Thank you, John. Good talking to you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.